Welcome to the Society Pod, a podcast for entrepreneurs, marketers, and leaders. Here's your host, Jessica Yarmy.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Society Pod. My guest today has spent basically his entire career in the fitness industry. He's worked on brands like Tough Mudder, Othership, Barry's Bootcamp, and he's currently the founder of the Wellness Growth Mastermind, and he's on a mission to give founders in the wellness space an upper edge just by connecting them through community, which you know I appreciate. Welcome to the show, Brian Von Ancken.
That's me. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
So I just gave a very brief introduction. How do you introduce yourself when you meet new people?
It's so hard to distill ourselves, right? You can just give the shorthands of, like you said, berries and Tough Mudder and founder and community. But I mean, really what it comes down to is I like to say I'm somebody who just is really passionate about trying to make the world a little bit healthier and to do it with a little bit of fun and not taking myself too seriously.
Let's start with you and your career path. So did you set out to have your career fully in the fitness world, or did that just happen by happenstance?
I played college football. I was always into athletics. When I was a kid, I think I said I was going to be a sports agent lawyer, but I never knew that I was going to go in the wellness route as far as a profession. And I actually went to law school after college and was about to take a job at a law firm. And then in my third year of law school, I managed to find an internship at this company called Tough Mudder, which at the time was totally unknown. There was like 10 of us in a room. And I was like, wow, this thing could really go somewhere. And I just realized that what I cared deeply about was, yes, knowing the law and being a lawyer is something that's interesting, but if you're able to do it within a field where you can really follow your passion, especially Tough Mudder to me was doing something really different at the time. And this is something that I think is relevant to almost any brand these days, but they were just building this diehard brand. People were literally getting tattooed Tough Mudder like all over their bodies, and people were so into it. And it wasn't about competition. It was partially about completing it, but it was about doing it with your friends. It was all about social wellness. And I think all of those values really resonated with me and the people that were building it. I decided to take the lead, and instead of going to a law firm, I went in-house at Tough Mudder, and that led to, what has been a 15-year career so far in the wellness space.
You are so, I would say, lucky to have your career start in that way, where you right out of the gate just overlap your passion areas and you land in the fitness world so that you can almost continue your athletic career. I got maybe 15 years into my career, and then I hit that point where I was able to overlap. But then you had a different kind of pivot moment when you went more from the law side of the world into the more of the operational side of the world. What prompted that pivot from legal into more ops related?
For anybody who's been a part of a startup, you wear a number of hats. And so I technically was the legal counsel at Tough Mudder, but I also was the race director at World's Toughest Mudder, which is a 24-hour Tough Mudder event. And so it was funny. There's a moment when World's Toughest Mudder, for those of you who don't know, it's a 24-hour Tough Mudder course. It's how many laps can you do in 24 hours? And we have like 30 obstacles. And, you're jumping off a cliff, you're electrically shocking, all this sort of stuff. There's a moment when it's about 2 a.m. on a Saturday and it's in Las Vegas. It's in the desert. The wind is whipping. And one of like the decals is like coming off the big signage for one of our big sponsors. And I've like had to climb up this rigging and I'm readjusting it. And I'm just like, I had this moment of being like, wow, when I was in law school, could I have like predicted that I'd be here in this moment, like fixing the signage for a sponsor? But it's like, that was just one of many hats that I ended up wearing. And I, did some marketing, did some different stuff at the company. I think when you're somebody who wants to be a contributor, it was really important for me to be a value add. And I was bringing in more revenue than I was taking from my salary. That was something I always kept as a point of pride as an attorney there. And so having a number of different experiences there, trying new things, being in an environment where people were open to that sort of stuff, I think that started my career to move back towards being like an operator.
I didn't know that they did a 24-hour race and that you were one of the organizers of it. You're not someone who identifies as being intense at all, are you?
I appreciate challenging myself. I hope this doesn't become a podcast about like my jobs at Tough Mudder, but very quickly I'll say another job that I had at Tough Mudder, I would go sample the courses. You know how like people go to restaurants and sample the restaurants and write a review? So I would go undercover at Tough Mudder events. I'd run the race with a mask on. I try to sneak in without signing a waiver. I try to steal from the merch tent. I try to skip obstacle, and I write like a report about it. So I guess I'm into, it's like, I definitely have done a lot of electric shock therapy and Arctic enema, which, by the way, that was the original cold plunge. Tough Mudder kind of started that trend as an obstacle.
We'll move on from your Tough Mudder days, but I think it is appropriate foundation to set where you live this life. Like, this is not just a job. This is not you in a career. This is really you pursuing your passions and things that you live on a day-to-day basis. I think that's important in the fitness industry right now, like those who are in it versus those who are, want to profit off of it. You've gone from like Tough Mudder to Othership. That's a huge range within the fitness industry. So what are you watching right now as you see the fitness industry really through that like holistic kind of lens?
I'd say the biggest part of my story that brings me from the Tough Mudders of the world to the Otherships is I'm somebody who was all about physical wellness, went through personal challenges, and realized that the mental side, the social wellness, the emotional side, these are all things that matter just as much. I've been thinking about this for the last 7 years or so, and I think we're just starting to get caught up. As I'm looking ahead and I'm looking out on the landscape, it's so interesting because obviously places like Equinox are starting to introduce these very elaborate, intense, holistic wellness offerings. But I think beyond that, there's just this big push for people to want the simplicity of everything in their wellness regime to be in one place and to be able to be around people who understand that and speak that language and can service them when they need it most. And so obviously recovery is huge. And I've seen so many places like Othership pop up. For those of you who don't know Othership, sauna cold plunge space, I think it can be looked at as a recovery space. There's so much science behind sauna cold plunging and alternate therapy, but actually it was built to solve loneliness. Like, it is a social place. That, I think, is the frontier of wellness that I think everybody knows, but I think it's going to start to get way more explicit around making sure that beyond just being at a gym and being able to nod at the person next to you or feel the other people around you, maybe there's ways in which people can feel an actual part of something and connect with others in more authentic and intentional ways.
I started my fitness career at Gold's, and I always saw the big boxes as exactly what you're talking about, like your one-stop shop for everything you need to live holistically well. I think it's a miss of the big box world to chase low cost, high volume and chase the decline in membership fees and not be able to chase or choose not to chase some of these emerging trends, keep your membership revenue whole, but offer more, like stay ahead. As I look at they always like talk about the middle. You get squeezed when you're in the middle when you don't evolve at your edges. Right? You go into so many big boxes these days where the equipment is dated, they haven't evolved. They've just let their facilities decline because they've ridden that low cost, high volume membership model decline. To me, I think what people need are those places that have a lot of different amenities. They have personal trainers who aren't just personal trainers, but guides through this universe of options. Because I think the holistically well person needs the high intensity days and they need the chill recovery days. It has to be a balance. Why aren't we stepping up to the challenge? It's like one of the things that's so frustrating to me about the fitness space. But okay, there's my rant about the fitness space. What would your rant be about the fitness space?
That's a really good question. I think just to go off of what you're saying, the way that I think about these sort of things is that, like, ultimately, the world is changing faster than I think anybody could have expected in terms of expectations and mindsets. And I think that even 5 to 6 years ago, the predominant mindset was, I'm at a gym. I don't want to think about X, Y, or Z because this is just what I do here. And don't give me any of this other stuff. It's incredible how fast that seems to have changed. And I think that what big boxes, what essentially all different modalities need to be able to acknowledge is that you have to shift a little bit because the customer has just changed. And if you just focus on the segment that is, I'd be curious to hear your take. I feel like there's so many people these days who are less turned off around things like a sauna cold plunge or maybe a 10-minute meditation and that sort of stuff than there was even 5 years ago. And it's just becoming so much more commonplace. And if you stay attached to the more rigid mindsets, you're really missing out on an opportunity, I'd say.
I think so. And I think it doesn't mean that person is going to be the every single day person. We keep on putting people into their 1% kind of buckets, and the mass market is going to dabble. And the mass market needs places that are like a Gold's Gym kind of layout where you have strength training, but you also have your recovery. You also have, even getting into the personal training aspect, you have like a prescriptive approach to how to best utilize like all of these different tools to achieve your best optimal wellness. But instead, we just look at it as the 1%. Are we bodybuilders or are we recovery? And we have to do a better job as an industry, just educating around the collective. You're going to need a mix of all of this. Like, yes, I want to talk to my unlimited membership kind of people who do want to come in every single day. But then I also need to talk to the people who are going to come in twice a week and then they're going to do something else the rest of the week. Like, we have to be better at like not judging people's cadence of their workout, because those who are coming in twice a week, they're probably doing it correctly, right? Like, they're probably like a little bit over here, a little bit over here, and we're not off the deep end of one modality. Like, off the deep end of one modality creates the injury, creates the burnout, creates like all of the things that we want to kind of avoid. And so I'm absolutely with you where it's like, we need to kind of embrace the middle, and we need to embrace like whatever mix is right for an individual person. What do you see the industry doing right now?
Obviously, people are coming back. They're coming back in person. I think that the fact that the world has gotten back to this place where at least numbers are getting closer to pre-COVID, they're doing a great job in giving people, there's such a need for people, not only just to work out, but to have a place where they can come and connect with other people. And I see that that's going well. I'd say that the retention efforts are like good in terms of like, hey, we know that if somebody comes here 3 times, we're going to need to, that's the magic number, and we got to get them there. And we've got to make sure that they know exactly what they're doing in terms of the offers and how to keep them. It is a brave new world in the sense of cost of acquisition couldn't be higher in terms of performance marketing. And, if you put $1 in, you're not going to necessarily get $1 back. The creativity needed around alternative acquisition is something that I still think can be a little bit better. I do think that the acquisition side of it is to be kind of ramped up a bit.
I will come into your mastermind and host an acquisition
panel.
Like, to me, the acquisition side is so easy because it's like, just meet people where they're at. And people aren't standing at the edge of the deep end. We're just pushing people in and letting them drown. People are at the shallow end saying, I don't know if this is right for me. And you have to just be in the shallow end with them. You have to hold their hand. You have to walk them into the door. You have to, like bit by bit by bit by bit, and say like, this is good for you. And I'm going to be with you every step of the way. Us fitness enthusiasts, like maybe that are in the like 1%er arena, like we like to talk to people as if they're also 1%ers. And most people won't go and do a 24-hour Tough Mudder run. It's a different audience, and where you can master the general market acquisition play, the 1%ers are going to find their stuff. Like in the weightlifting world, if someone wants to hack squat, they're going to find the gym that has the hack squat. That's like, doesn't matter to me how you marketed to me. I know exactly what I need, and I'm going to go where I can find it. I'm going to go where the cold plunge gets down to 20 degrees. They know all the things, but the education needs to happen in the shallow end. The education needs to happen for the mass market. We just need to be better about it across the whole industry. It's going to bring more people in. It's going to bring more people off the couch to get to that point. Talk to me about the Wellness Growth Mastermind and what you're building with that community.
What I'm doing is something that I just did by accident about 2 years ago, maybe a little more. When I started at Othership, I just started to meet all these amazing people who were building great things in the health and wellness space. And I just had this mindset to be like, gosh, you need to meet you. And like, there's so many connections. I'm just a natural connector. And so I started to host these monthly meetings that were just leaders in the health and wellness space sharing what's working, what's not working, and just having a more broad sense of the definition. We are a community now of 150 plus leaders in the health and wellness space. And we're not just big box gym owner. We have a lot of people in the fitness space, but we also have people in the mental health space. We have a lot of mental health apps. We have a lot of supplements. We have a lot of food as medicine companies. We have a lot of wearables. And I think the definition of wellness is just coming together in a way where if you're not well versed in all of this, and if you're not aware of the companies and aware of the stuff that's going on, I think you're ultimately at a disadvantage. And so what I've created with this community is a space where everybody in the group is three things. They're accomplished, they're kind, and generous. And if you put enough people like that in the room together, amazing things happen. I'm not the one, I've got a lot of experience, I have a lot of opinions, but I'm not the expert in everything. I'm the one who puts you in a room, makes the introduction, facilitates the conversation, and gives you permission to realize that like we're all in our bubbles. We are all in our little bubbles. We only talk to the same people, and we're reinventing the wheel quite a lot. And that if you're able to have a space where you can check and save yourself some time and ask questions, it ends up being, just a huge value to you personally and your company.
When you and I connected last week, we hadn't met before. Hensley just introduced us, and you and I had like a brief conversation. Then, like coming off of that conversation, you're like, okay, and you need to meet this person, send an email introduction. And you need to meet this person, send an email introduction. I think that level of relationship building, value add, creation at the front end of relationships is just such a great way to like lead with generosity, lead with gratitude, and you could see how your actions would permeate through your organization and would just set the tone for everyone else coming in to say, this is how we work. We're a community of givers. We're not a community of takers. And I think a lot of mastermind groups would benefit from having those kind of like shared values or core values across the community.
It's hard because I think the traditional archetype or the traditional type of person in the fitness space is a certain way. I think that way is maybe direct, and I'm going to be strong and I'm going to be tough and I'm going to just power through. And I think that there's value to that way of being. I think it's changing, and we need to acknowledge that, it's an all boats rise industry where we are. And if you can be the type where you're give first, it does come around and it's like, you talked about meeting people where they're at. If you play the long game and you do it the right way, it does end up working out. But it's hard to play the long game and do it the right way if you're just in your bubble, if that makes sense. Like you kind of have to expose yourself more broadly, going to events, joining groups like mine, or you got to give yourself the opportunity for serendipity to happen and for that one introduction to just change the trajectory of your business. I think you're right that it does permeate into the group. It's kind of one of the unique aspects of it, which I'm grateful for.
So you posted on LinkedIn recently, growing your network equals growing your business. How do you kind of personally prioritize relationship building? And then how does Wellness Growth Mastermind kind of streamline that process for others?
It's hard if you're just in it. I've been in it. I've been a founder. I've been in like in-house. It's like if you're just in it every day, the likelihood that you're going to have the time to go and try to meet the exact right person for you and put the effort in, like it sounds easy, but it's actually quite hard. And so what we do is if you join, you're going to meet one person per month. I'm doing one warm intro per month. And to me, that's like a cadence that I hope is not overwhelming. And it's very intentional, right? I speak with you, I interact with you, I know what's top of mind for you. And if you're like, man, this SEO game is really bugging me. And I'm just like, oh, somebody who just did that, I know exactly who to talk to you. So it's kind of like a concierge behind the scenes doing that annoying work for you. And the other thing that I think is important to note is there's a lot of people in the group who are super well connected. Like they know everybody, but it's annoying and hard to maintain your network. You're like, hey, what's up? It takes time. And so a group like this just makes it easier. So we have these group calls where you're able to be on a call with like 60 other people in the industry. And there's just so much like, DMs going on or putting people into breakout rooms, and you just end up maintaining a warmness to your network and growing it that I think a lot of people who are really well connected in the space end up appreciating as well. So it's one of those things that there's lots of ways to grow people's networks. And I think it's not just growing it outward, but growing it in value, like the ones you already have, making them more fruitful.
I think that as entrepreneurs, let alone entrepreneurs in the fitness space, we do have that tendency to just lean solopreneur mindset, I need to be able to figure this out. Or if I can't figure it out, it's a sign of weakness. Or if I need to ask for help, it's a sign of weakness. But it is such an unlock to have a fast-tracked problem solved because of a warm introduction, and just to take someone else's learnings and jump over that obstacle yourself. And it definitely seems like that's the kind of value that you're bringing with your group. Who should be a part of the Wellness Growth Mastermind?
The best people are two categories. One are founders in the wellness industry, people who've gotten some funding, gotten some traction, pre-seed, seed. They've done some of the work and they're thinking about growth all the time. And if you're thinking about growth all the time, odds are you're a great fit for this group. The other archetype is somebody who's at a more established company and they're also thinking about growth all the time, whether that's a head of growth, maybe that's chief marketing, head of partnerships. I'd say that if you're somebody who's interested in up-leveling your growth game, whether it's via networking, via asking questions, let's just say you're trying to create an influencer marketing campaign. Okay, if I Google this, the terrible results that will come up, I kind of look at my community as like an alternative to Google, where it's like, okay, instead of Googling it, I put it in the community and like I'm immediately getting these responses from people who've been there, done that, giving you people to talk to. And I think, it's just creating, like LinkedIn is great, but I think LinkedIn is a bit impersonal. And when you shrink it down a little bit more, you don't have to worry as much about, like, if I asked this question on LinkedIn, it'd be kind of weird, because LinkedIn is becoming more of like, your public persona. So this is like an alternate space where you can kind of ask questions, but it's for them. And then we have a couple investors, service provider people in there. Like I keep that to a small percentage, but I make sure that they're really good, giving first type of people, and they can like add a lot of value for people in there.
Yeah, I think about it through a marketing lens. And I think about, to use the LinkedIn example, I'm connected to so many vendors on LinkedIn. But if you were to ask me, like, who should I use to do XYZ? Like, I know exactly who I would recommend, and it wouldn't necessarily be of the 20 on LinkedIn. So I think it's totally valid what you're saying, and having it be in the group chat as opposed to like out in public also. You sometimes don't want to make that kind of public recommendation. It's more you want to connect good people to good people. So 2 years from now, when we circle back and do another podcast, what are we talking about with Wellness Growth Mastermind?
Well, I'm so excited. I'm putting it on the calendar. Thank you for the invite back. You'll be on episode 200 by 150. That'll
hopefully, yeah.
I appreciate the question, and to me, I'm somebody who I know where I want to go. This is going to be a community of 250 really, really bought in people who just have each other's backs. They know each other well. They're well represented across the industry, and they are so excited to form partnerships with each other, create value for each other, and to grow as businesses. And I see the Wellness Growth Mastermind as just being the go-to place where it's like, I need representation in that group. I've got to have somebody in that group, because that group is the group that they all have the most fun. They all are, connect, the cream of the crop in terms of their specific niche, and they're doing it in a way that is, admirable and something that they're proud to be a part of. Like, people are going to be really proud to be a part of it. We've got quarterly events right now in person. I could see that becoming slightly bigger. I'm not interested in conferences. I'm not trying to build a big conference, but I love being a small part of bigger events and being a place where people can have more intimate conversation. The level of people that are coming out, the level of guests that we're getting, the level of value. I do a giveaway on every call. And like last time, we just gave away this like total biomarker, $2,000 dollars a year type thing. And I could see the giveaways are just going to get bigger, and people are going to want to be more involved more. So it's going to be a good sized group where people really care about each other and have each other's back. And it's going to be something where there's representation all across the country, and maybe, all across part of the globe. I don't know if I can do all time zones, but a good amount.
You can do it. I love that you have structured it to be an action-oriented group as well. I think one thing that happens when you go to conferences is it is a lot of talk. You take a lot of notes, and then you leave and you just go back to doing your job, and nothing changes and no action is taken. Even like you're talking about partnerships and building together. Like, when you're a community that decides, let's build together, you can build bigger things if you leverage each other's audiences. Going back to acquisition, one of the brands I totally crush on right now is Liquid Death. And they just have such a partnership play right now. And as a marketer, you're sitting there with envy, like, oh my gosh, they are partnered with Elf Cosmetics to do like what, just like really wild partnerships. But when you strip back the brand you realize this is just shared values coming together to say, let's build something great, even if you're not the size of Liquid Death or Elf Cosmetics. Be the size that you are and find like sized, like valued companies and roll out a partnership. Even if it's small, even if it's just something that you do 50 units of apparel as opposed to 50,000, start somewhere just to get yourself in that mindset of building together and leveraging audience and cross promoting with other like-sized companies. Because immediately, regardless of what size you are, if you partner with someone like-sized, like you've just doubled. So like if you can run that play. And the way that you get to be able to run that play is through groups like yours that like create the relationships, create the trust, create the foundation of knowing who does share my values, who would I want to build with. And I don't want to build with people I don't vibe with. That's why I'm an entrepreneur, like I'm past the point of working with people that I don't want to
Yeah.
work with. So find your people. And it's such a great way to find your people by being in a group like Wellness Growth Mastermind.
And just think about the difference between the dynamic of creating a partnership agreement if you're somebody who's cold outreached or like a vague connection and, it seems like it's adversarial. If it's somebody who you've met a couple times, been exposed to, there's just a fluidity to the creation of the partnership, which I think bleeds into the partnership itself. Everybody gets more excited about it. And that's how those partnerships end up being successful, is if they're not just like, ugh, I got to do this. And it's like, no, all parties are excited. We know that there's value. We know there's aligned values, like all that sort of stuff. That's a subtle but important difference that I've seen really, really take root in the group.
And when you don't know each other, or if you don't come from that warm intro, partnership agreements get caught up in legal world, as you know, where it's just like, we need 17 pages of an agreement to make this happen. Where at my size, like I'll do deals just like email confirmation, like let's go. And I think it's like finding the people who roll like that, but with that warm intro so that like this is somebody that's not going to take advantage of like what we're trying to do here.
You're right. Absolutely.
So kind of pivoting to more of you and like your path, I like to kind of dig into seasons of trials and tribulations. Has there been a season either in your career or in your fitness journey even where you were at a low point? Where were you and what did you do to get yourself out of that low point?
I'm somebody who, grew up playing college football, grew up like just kind of like sports guy who was not cool admitting that he was weak in any way or like anything was wrong. That was something that served me pretty well until my late 20s. I married my college sweetheart and we went through miscarriages and divorce. And it was something that I just didn't really register for me. And I had friends that would take a bullet for me, but I didn't know how to tell them I wasn't okay. And so what I ended up doing in that time was really take some time to reflect and to take some time to push myself out of my comfort zone. So what I ended up doing pretty soon after that went down is I went and did a silent retreat, which is like 7 days of not talking and just meditating. I had never meditated more than 10 minutes. I would not recommend this as a path, but I like listened to a Tim Ferriss podcast and he did it. And I was like, I could try it. And it seems interesting. So I went to California and that was an experience that, I think it doesn't need to be a 7-day silent retreat, but just finding experiences and time to try to reflect is one of the best ways that we can try to unravel all the stuff that just happens from being a human. I'm just a firm believer in the fact that we're all dumb animals. We might think that we're these smart, sophisticated humans, and we are to some degree, but ultimately our bodies are dumb animals. And there's a lot of emotions and different things that get kind of like mixed up throughout living our lives. And one of the best and only ways to work through that is just taking some time and space and giving yourself permission to feel and to actually experience what's happening in the present moment and not necessarily be so caught up in the past or in the future. And it's so much easier said than done. It takes a lot of time. But my biggest thing is like, I want to encourage people to crack the door open to a bit of self-reflection, whether it's going on a fishing trip and you just like take in the nature or you play golf. It doesn't need to be 7-day silent retreats, but just taking that little bit of time to journal, taking that little bit of time to be grateful and seeing what that brings up in you. Because it doesn't mean you're weak. In fact, it just means that you're human and giving yourself permission to do that.
I think as athletes, you kind of have the resilient work ethic, driver mentality and mindset. And it does seem like athletes in general hit that place of needing the skill set to balance that extreme competitiveness that
Yeah,
comes through. Do you
totally.
feel that at all in your world?
I'm super competitive still, and I haven't let that part of me die out. But I do think, yes, there's so much that's instilled in you to be a good athlete, great athlete, that you need to power through, that you need to be resilient, and that you just have to like ignore everything else. I'd say it's a reprogramming. For me, it's kind of like the ability for an athlete is almost best suited to be somebody who can make those changes because you understand team dynamics, right? Or you understand what it's like to be on a team and you understand what you need to be like in order to be a great teammate. If I look back on my career, I actually feel like if I had done some of the things that I'm doing now, I wonder what my performance would have done. And I actually think that there's a higher upside if you have the ability to ground yourself and you feel like you're in control on those other aspects of health. I think that leads to better performance, actually.
That's the only way that I can wrap my head around recovery. I'm like, I need to recover so that I can hustle
Yeah,
harder.
exactly. But like, and that's the thing is like, I still hustle. All that stuff can still happen, but there's something that's slightly different about it from an awareness perspective that I think brings it to a next level. Because if it's coming from a place of should, expectation, fear, I think you're ultimately always going to plateau lower than if you're coming from a place of like acceptance, knowledge, and excitement. I know so many people who are so crushing life and I crush and I crush and I crush and they're so worried to take the foot off the gas because if I take the foot off the gas, then I'm not going to be there. But I also know that there's a next level that you can get to that's even higher if you're willing to build in those recovery days, if you're willing to find your version of reflection, if you're willing to find your version of true social connection, whatever that is. I really get angry that there's a monopoly on some of that stuff from people who are like in the woo-woo space. And it's like, no, that is not true. It's wrong. And my whole goal is to like help people bring that to everybody in a way that's accessible, feels playful, and is just like, yeah, okay, great. I'll try that. Why not? I'll try doing a 60-second visualization. Why not?
The like work hard, recover harder kind of structure or balance feels really correct. And then it also feels very misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
Like taking that time, it doesn't mean we're completely checked out. It means it's all part of the same process, really. What are you working on right now and what help do you need if you're going to throw an ask out into the universe?
I've got a lot going on. We've got a big event coming up in New York. The community is just growing leaps and bounds, which is amazing. I think the biggest ask for me is if you're somebody who is a founder or you're working on growth in a health and wellness company and you feel like something like the Wellness Growth Mastermind, you just feel like it would be useful to have other people to chat through this with, or you feel like there's some questions, or you just want to make more money, you want to grow, I would say just reach out. I'd love to connect because I love to meet new people. Even if you don't become a part of the group, I just love to help. I love to chat through where you're at. And to me, I'm at the point where I'm going to be bringing in a new cohort probably in the new year, and just would love to meet people between now and the new year and get a sense of who they are. Because I feel like my big ask is really also to take care of yourself if you're working in the space, and to try to let's not be caricatures of ourselves where like we're in the wellness space and we're trying to help people and then we're not taking care of ourselves. Like that always pisses me off.
Yeah, I think that's critically important to lead by example. So I know you're going to be at Beyond Active, so no late nights for you. Let's lead by example.
I don't know about that. I still like to have fun. Come on.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
The fitness industry is just notorious for the work hard, party hard, but we'll throw some recover hard into that also. But is there anything else that's top of mind with you that we didn't talk through?
How can people make sure that they're thinking about the space holistically? What is the opportunities with wearables? What is the opportunities with food as medicine? How can we not be scared by the traditional healthcare system, but maybe there's some interesting ways to interact, or, the employer wellness side of things? Like every single business has so many different ways to grow, right? There's a million platforms, there's a million modalities. And the question is how are you, there's like everything. You're never going to be an expert in everything. But if you're curious about anything, giving yourself the chance to spend a little bit of time to try to see if it might be right for you, because you're never going to be able to do everything. But that doesn't mean that you can't try new things and put yourself out there. I think that's just a really important thing. I'm only on Meta. I just do performance marketing and I never tried anything. It's like, okay, well, that can change. And, have you ever been interested in trying to get on podcasts, or have you ever been interested in this? It's like, there's other aspects that I think we need to make sure we're thinking about, especially on the B2B side. I see a lot of gyms, a lot of places like wanting to do B2B, but they're like, I can't, that's way too hard, and I don't have time for that. It's like, well, actually, there might be some easy ways for you to get some wins locally, depending on where you're at. So just having that open mind on what it means to grow and not just being so narrow-minded.
Well, and I love that you are somebody who is starting those conversations and enabling those conversations between builders, because one of the best ways to keep an open mind is to listen. And so thank you for all of the work that you're doing to bring experts together, enable conversations between people who do want to grow and who do want to build a better future for the fitness industry. Thank you so much for being with us today on the Society Pod.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. I appreciate you having me on, and we're just gonna have to do this again in 100 episodes.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Society Pod.